And it's before I start, I would like to tell you that you don't need to believe anything of what I'm going to share with you today, neither to believe of the sources from which I take the information. I'm not here to make you believe something or to ask you to agree. The source of the information is not so important. The important is the message, and you are the person who will decide if something is true for you, if something makes sense, or if it doesn't. Now, we will see now a very short video from Bashar where he talking about the space and time as one whole idea. This video was what inspired me to pursue this journey and to follow this idea. It helps me to understand a little bit deeper what are actually those two energies which he calls space and time energies. Okay.
What do we have? Space-time. Space-time. Would you also like to remove the 4A and B? What do we have there? A little space-time graph.
Now I will pause the video here and just want to emphasize that there is a line here in between which is very important. In a few seconds Bashar will show another graph which will be without this line, but this line is very essential and it can represent something that it's called the line of economy or the primary axis. And the primary axis, you will see later, that it's always developed within the octave, no matter what is the size. Let's continue the video and see what Bashar is talking.
All right. Now, let us explain. We have talked about this briefly before. Oh, you may sit. Thank you very much. The idea is, you already know from what you call your science of relativity, or some of you may not know this, that there is an effect in your reality called time dilation. That when you move, let's say in a spaceship, faster and faster and faster and faster, and approach what you call the speed of light, which is simply, in a sense, the border of your particular reality. Doesn't mean you can't actually travel faster, it's just the border of your particular reality, just the threshold. But in your physical reality, while you travel in your physical reality up to the speed of light, the phenomenon called time dilation is noticed to occur. What this simply means is, the faster you move in space, the slower you move in time. Time slows down. This is what creates the twin paradox, as many of your scientists have expressed it, so that if you imagine there are two twins that are the same age, and one steps into a spacecraft and goes out into the stars and travels very close to the speed of light, time for them on the ship will slow down to the point that when they come back, they may actually be many, many, many years younger than the twin who stayed on Earth, who will have aged in the meantime. The idea to understanding this is to understanding space-time as a 100% idea. There can only be 100% space-time. So, if you are traveling at 50% of the speed of light, then the idea is that you are using up that much space. There's only 50% of time left. So you can only experience half the time. The closer you travel to the speed of light, you're using up more and more of the space of space-time,
Yes.
and there is less and less of the time left. So you only experience a little bit of it. So if you're traveling at 99%, you're only experiencing 1% of time and 99% of space. Conversely, when you're standing perfectly still, as most of you are right now, you're experiencing almost all of time and very little of space at all. You're not moving around. So it's always a shared idea. Whatever you use of time, you can only have that much space left. Whatever you use of space, you only have that much time to use. The graph shows you this in this way. The line is all of time at one end, all of space at the other end. And when you start moving and expanding your use of space from 0 into a cone that widens, then you have very little time left. But when you go the other way and use all of the idea the other way, then the cone moves in the other direction. It's just an expansion cone. I'm using very little here, I'm using a lot here. Using very little of this when I'm using a lot of this, but when I'm using a little of this, I'm using a lot of that. So it's just a double cone going in this way to show you when you are using a little bit of this or a lot of that. You follow me so far? All right. Now,
even First Enoch and
this
some of that
is also the key to building a space-time antenna.
That had come down.
A device that actually uses space-time energy that you can then learn to translate into different forms of energy if you wish, such as electricity or light or heat or whatever you wish to do with it. The space-time antenna actually takes the form of this graph of the two intersecting cones. So if you imagine in your mind right now, let's say made out of a spiral copper wire or a spiral tube, imagine starting on the ground and imagine bringing the tube around in a circle and then spiraling it upward, getting smaller and smaller in circumference. You're describing a cone. You're spiraling up to the tip of the cone. However high you want the cone to be, doesn't matter. However wide you want to start, doesn't matter right now for the purpose of this illustration. It will matter later in terms of fine-tuning the geometry to get the right effect. But right now, just for the purpose of this illustration, just imagine starting on the ground, start spiraling your tube around and around and around, smaller, smaller, till you have a cone made up out of a spiral tube. At the top, at the very tip of the cone, then take that tube and move it out to the same diameter as the base of the cone and start spiraling your way down through the other cone. So when you spiral it up, leave some gaps in between the tube so that when you spiral down, you can go through those gaps and actually have the two cones interpenetrating. Until you get all the way down, now you're inside the base of the first cone, creating a downward facing cone, and you get down to the tip at the bottom and then bring that out and connect it to the base of the other cone. Now you have two interpenetrating cones, one facing up, one pointing down. In a sense, it's almost like the idea of the Solomon seal, or what you now call the Jewish star, the six-pointed star. If you look at it simply flat on, it will sort of appear a little bit like this idea, although not quite exactly. But it's the idea of two interpenetrating triangles. When you create this kind of a resonant device and you do it where the cones are actually angled at their apices at 33 degrees, you will be able to actually have a space-time antenna. Depending upon the quality of your material, the number of windings, the size of the cone, and what have you, and other conditions, you can actually cause this cone with a little bit of an electrical charge to start resonating at a certain frequency that will amplify that energy by drawing down from space-time energy and thus then giving out more energy than you're putting in. So, this diagram, this space-time diagram, shows you literally graphically how to create a space-time antenna for those of you who might be interested in playing with this idea as a fun hope.
So here it's what Bashar explained, and the most important thing is to understand that the space and time, they are a homogeneous idea. So when we have more of one of those idea of this, for example, more of the space, we have less from the time. So we cannot have more of time without losing some space. They are interconnected, and the time dilation effect, it's not only created by high velocities, but also, it's for you to know, it's also when you have a very strong gravitational field, also a time dilation occur in these two scenario, when you have a very high speed or very strong gravitational field. Now the space-time antenna which Bashar described, you can see it here on the right, and also you can see on the bottom a version of the space-time antenna which I have created. Now, I would like to share with you something that, first of all, let's talk about, before we continue, what is actually symmetric field physics. Is the study of what exactly? It's a new science. It's this is a new science which is dealing with the subatomic level of, or the structure of physical reality, as Bashar explained, the substructure of physical reality, and it's the study of the natural law and the cosmic forces. We're going to talk about which exactly natural laws or cosmic forces in just a few seconds. But basically all of them, all the knowledge, it's based on a corpuscular field principle. The idea that we are immersed in a field which have a corpuscular nature. A corpuscular nature, it means that the field is created from very small units. I do not like to use the word particle because particle implies that it's something with mass. Those corpuscles, they do not have mass, they can be infinitely small. And this is why we don't use the word particles. Instead, we use the word corpuscles. You can see them maybe as an analogy, like the photons. Photons have no mass. This is what allows it to move with the speed of light. And also the scientists do not know what is the size. They have no idea what's the structure, but they know that there is no mass, and this is what allows to move so fast. So those space and time field, they are, the idea is that there is a corpuscular field created from those smaller, infinitely small corpuscles.
Can I have a question a little bit?
Yes.
I was wonder about the ether
Yes.
that Bashar said, and in my imaginations, well, Bashar said that exists only one prime
Radiant.
Yes, prime radiant.
Yes.
But but by the way, I think that in my imaginations that the ether must be in some sense have corpusculars. It's not infinite stream of energy. It must have corpusculars,
Yes.
much smaller, in my opinion, like Planck length, much smaller probably.
Yes.
But it is corpuscular that you say.
Yes. The main idea when we're talking about the space and time fields and symmetric field physics is that there are fields made out of very small corpuscles, and you will see why they can be so small, because they have a specific characteristics which allows them to be very small. Although they are very small and they do not have mass, they can create different accretions under pressure, and they can create accretion to the point which can crystallize and can create mass or densities, different densities, which can have mass, and this mass, when it's immersed in the forceful field like the gravitational field, this mass can be translated into weight. But the main idea that we're going to talk about corpuscular field, how they interact those corpuscles. And because the fields are corpuscular, it will lead to sacred geometry. Sacred geometry, it's the science about the relationship between those corpuscular field, these small corpuscles, how they relate. When they merge together, they create so-called circuits, different circuits, and the different circuits can create different, they can yield forces, they can create, for example, stability or instability, forced augmentations or force reduction, and different side effects, okay? But the sacred geometry, it's a knowledge about how those corpuscles, they can be joined together in a different way in order to create different effects. You can create different pressure, different potential difference, you can transmit information or energy from one place to the other if you know how to arrange those corpuscles, if you know how to play with this corpuscular field. So this is the sacred geometry in general, because it's very strongly related to this idea. And the other idea is that it's related to alchemy, And when we're talking about an alchemy, this is in a sense the knowledge to transform energy or information between different densities. Okay, for example, in our fourth dimension we have different density. Water can be solid, can be liquid, can be gas, can be three different, for example, densities. But when those corpuscles arrange in a different way, they can create not only densities but even different dimensions. And each bigger dimension, it will have less density, it will exhibit lower pressure and therefore higher frequency, higher speeds. And the alchemy, it's the idea of transformation between the different densities or even between the dimension. The energy can be transformed or drawn from one dimension to another, from fifth dimension to another. And the idea of the space-time antenna, which Bashar is talking about, it's the idea of transformation of energy from the astral plane, from a higher dimension, from the fifth dimension into the fourth dimension. We are fourth dimension here. We have width, height, length, and we have time. This is fourth dimension. So the idea of alchemy is transformation between densities but also between dimensions. You can interrupt me anytime you prefer, and if you want to clarify something, I will be glad to stop and to answer any questions that we may have. So the natural law and the cosmic forces, when we're talking about, we're going to address these 12 points. We're going to speak about what is magnetism, what is electricity, what is gravity, why the objects with a different weight fall at the same rate. This is one of my favorite. What is the momentum and inertia? Here in this fifth point, we're going to discuss the work of Isaac Newton. He gave us 3 laws of motion, which are very important, and they can be improved, they can be seen, they can be expanded. He tells us why certain things happen, but we can see a much deeper picture once we understand these corpuscular fields. Now the 6th point is why the work of Isaac Newton is incomplete. This includes the previous point actually. The 7th is there any empty space? We will see that there is no empty space because these corpuscles are everywhere and there is no empty space. They're interconnected and there is no empty space. What is the nature of time? How does the space relate to time? What are universal forces and why they are invisible? We will see why we cannot measure them with our current equipment because they are very, very small and they cannot be easy to be measured. How is the galaxy structure? We will see that the galaxy and also the subatomic particles can be explained, the structure, with the same principles and with the same laws, which our modern science is struggling, because we have different ideas for the microcosmos and for the macrocosmos. What drives the weather system? This is very interesting. We will see how the temperatures relate to space and time fields, maybe in the future videos, but this is extremely interesting for me as well. Now, this is the space torus that you can see. The space torus, it's a pattern of, or describe the relationship, or the, how to say, the space torus, it happens in the corpuscular field when we have forces, when we have something that it's moving, when we have a motion within the corpuscular field, always will be created a space torus. No matter if the motion is mechanical motion or we're talking about signals of electromagnetic radiation or energy, always will be a space torus created, although with different properties, but it will always be created this kind of a space torus around a moving object or forces which have velocities or speeds. Now, our job is to see what Bashar gave us for the last 40 years, because he has a huge and extensive library of information about metaphysics, sometimes about physics and other ideas. Bashar gave us a lot of interesting perspective, but also from the other side we have A.T. Olson, which is the author of the Alchemical Manual. this lady, she passed away, but she received the information from 1961, and the work was completed in 1994 and then published more than 40 years later on. This work was published, and this book, it's full with description about the corpuscular field and how the space and time energies are working together, how they are actually creating different forces. But what is interesting between those two sources is that in the alchemical manual we have descriptions of how the energies are working, but from Bashar we have actually descriptions of the actual geometry or the devices that can be constructed based on those principles. There are no devices mentioned in this book, and the book it's not easy to read. It's very kind of hard to read, at least for me. So now our job, or my job with you, is to take these two sources and put it together in order to relate the information for the modern science. In order to understand those new concepts, we need to relate it to something that we already know from our modern science, to use ideas that we are familiar with, to translate it in a sense. So this is our job. Now in the symmetric field physics, the important thing is that it's linked between the quantum mechanics and general relativity. Those are the two main ideas in our modern science. And the quantum mechanics is dealing with the microcosmos, which describes the behavior of matter and energy in the tiny scales, typically in the atomic and the subatomic level, the things that we cannot see with our senses. Is the behavior of particles like electron, protons, atoms, very small units, and has very proven laws and principles. But from the other side we have the macrocosmos, or the general relativity, which was developed from Einstein, describing the gravitational forces, curvature of space and time, mass and energy, dealing with stars, galaxies, huge celestial bodies, and so on and so forth. So we have both of these ideas. They are working fine separately, but together they cannot find agreement. Many times they are in conflict between each other. And the symmetric field physics, it's providing the link, this space torus and the corpuscular field, because the principles and the laws in this symmetric field physics are equally valid for the microcosmos, for the subatomic level particles, this corpuscular field, but also for the celestial bodies and planets and stars and galaxies and so on and so forth. They're using the same principles. Okay, this is the difference with the symmetric field physics and our modern science. So Newton not only gave us the three laws for motion, but also he described that in his work Optics in 1704, he described that he believed that the field is corpuscular, made out of very small particles, and his theory actually can fit with the light, with the reflection, refraction, with the colors of the tiny fumes. It can be in alignment with this idea, with the dispersion of light. It's fine, it's working fine. However, later on, when we start to have different technologies, we start to make different experiments, we see that the light also behaves like a wave. Okay, and the corpuscular theory of Newton didn't fit the diffraction, the interference, and the source of wave theory, the Young double slit experiment, where we can observe that the light can behave like a particle or like a wave. Okay, so we are not sure which is it a particle or is it a wave. So the theory, the corpuscular theory of Newton fell from the right part, from all this idea written with the red color. Okay, but this is because Newton thought that those corpuscles, they are made out of something like a mass, they are solid. But the corpuscular field that we are talking about, it's not solid. Okay, it's not solid, it's without mass, and this is the difference. So he was, in a sense, half right in his assumption. Now we're going to see here the first division of this corpuscular field, and I would like to play 1 minute of a recording from the book Alchemical Manual, where the civilization, they call themselves star people. They do not reveal their origin. They call themselves a star people, but they describe those fields very precisely. And I would like to start from the beginning, just to play a record for you.
In the beginning, our universe is made up of field energies arranged in harmonic octaves. The greatest of these octave energies is the realm of God, a single point and continuum, also known as one spirit, or all that is, or mind, or any name people choose to honor the totality of life. From this singular mind of power comes a system so perfect and mysterious that none of us can fully understand it. This grand law of creation begins with a simple division of energy, a point and a sphere, a contracting force and an expansive force.
So the first division of the corpuscular field, it begins with contractive force and expansive force, and this is in a sense what Bashar refers as the one, for those of you who follow his work. And then this corpuscle, one corpuscle, divide itself in this way of contraction and expansion. This is the first division, and then divide in 2 and 4 and so on and so forth until unimaginably small corpuscles. Okay, so the idea is that beyond this first division, outside of it, there is nothing else. The only way existence or life can create is to self-divide and self-create itself from within, because there is nothing outside of life, there is nothing outside of existence. Only, as Bashar explained, non-existence, but non-existence by definition does not exist. Okay, so there is nothing outside which can influence. The only thing that life or existence can do is to divide itself in the smaller pieces and recreate itself from within, in that sense. So the first division of one, I create here a video, a simulation to see, just to have an idea. So the contracting continuum, it's with the vector lines going inward, and the expansion, it's happening in all directions at once. It have a wavefront in a sense. I will put it one more time just to see. So you can see that those vectors, when they converge, they contract towards the center, the density of those vectors increase. They are closer and closer to each other. So they have a higher density, and they will create, later on you will see, they will create higher potential, and they will create also high pressure, and they will create accretions, and later on you will see that it will create more mass and so on and so forth. But the main idea here, the most important thing, is to remember that Bashar said that space and time are whole idea. When you have more of space, you have less of time, and when you have more of time, you have less of space. So when we are on the circumference of this sphere, we have a lot of space, and when this space is shrinking, if we go towards the center, the space diminish. And when the space diminish, we have to have more time. This is why they call them space and time field, because the more you go towards the center, you experience less volume of space. Okay, therefore you must have more time. Okay, and the more you go towards the circumference, you experience more volume, more space, and therefore you will experience less time. All right, and you will see that if you fill up this sphere with a gas and you shrink the volume, you will have high pressure. And when you have high pressure, this is favoring the time in duration. The things stay there for a long time also. Okay, so the main idea is that when those fields, they contract, they experience less volume, less space, therefore more time, and from which the names come, space and time fields, generally speaking. Now, another thing is to show you here on the left, we have just make some calculations here. This is D16 is diameter. If you have a sphere with diameter with 16 meters diameter, the volume of this sphere, it will be 2114 cubic meters, more than 2000 cubic meters. But if you have a sphere which is smaller than that, twice smaller, then the volume, it will be only 268 cubic meters. And if you make this sphere even smaller, again twice smaller, you will have only 33 cubic meters. So you can see how the volume is shrinking, the diameter is shrinking twice, but the volume is shrinking much more. So the space within this sphere is shrinking very rapidly, okay, when you have a convergence. And this, because the space is shrinking so much, you experience less space, you have to experience more time. A time dilation is something that is not from Bashar, it's our scientists are using. This is why the satellites are using different time on the clocks, on the watches, because of the time dilation, in order to be synchronized. So you can see that from where the name, one of the reason from where the names space and time fields are coming. And we will see later on how this relates to kinetic and potential energy. But generally speaking, when you have a space field, you will have less pressure towards the circumference. Because you have less pressure, you will have a higher speed, okay? And higher speed, it will equal more kinetic energy, okay? And when we're talking about potential energy, to create potential energy, you need forceful field, and you need a location, specific location, where to put something in order to create a potential energy. So this idea of the first division of expansion and contraction, you can see it in all religions, you can see it in all mystical schools, like the circumpunct. Okay, the idea of the circumpunct is a symbol that consists of a circle and a dot at the center. This symbol has been across various cultures in historical periods, and it is, the meaning can vary, depends of which script you can find it. This is the symbol, and we will see here in which religion what is the meaning. But generally speaking, this is the description of the first division of those corpuscular fields. And also, because everything is fractal, this first division, or this huge corpuscle, it's equal like the smaller one. Like you said, the Planck scale, they have the same principles inside the same structure. And they consist of several components, very easy to understand. One of them is the point of potential, which is at the center. At this image, I created like a small sphere, but I exaggerated here because I wanted to point it out. Generally speaking, this point of potential is a dimensionless. It does not have width, length, or height. Has no dimension, this point. This is what allows the corpuscles to be infinitely small. The other component of these corpuscles is the spatial sphere, which is around the point of potential. And the bigger potential we have at the center, the bigger this sphere also will be. They are interconnected. When one is growing, the other is growing as well. We have radii. Those are pathways through which the time field is moving. Usually move towards the center. It can move both ways, but usually it's moving towards the center, and it's in a sense converging towards the center. We call this convergence, we call it closure. It's called closure. So we have also primary axis, always, regardless to the size of the corpuscle, can be small or big. We will always have a primary axis, which is going to be like a highway for the time field to travel, for the currents to travel, this primary axis. And if this primary axis is traveling upward, in our case, there will be a vortex on the equatorial plane which will move with the right hand rule. If the current is moving upward, the vortex, seeing from above, it will rotate counterclockwise, following the right hand rule from the Ampere's law in our modern physics. So this is basically the elements of the corpuscles. I remove here, I didn't show the secondary axis, which are on the equatorial plane, but you will be able to see them. You will be able to see them later on. Now, in this slide here, I would like to also play a recording from the book and then elaborate on this recording. We're going to talk about the second division here.
Divisions in absolute energy. The division of one is now in creation. We live in a one self-creating, self-dividing universe among a multitude of universes. Nothing, no action, no life, no idea is separate from the one universal time-space point and continuum as it emanates in divine balance. All is a function of one in symmetric expression. From this system arises the study of alchemical law. One has created a spatial sphere that continues to radiate and a center point that continues to contract. This is the first division of the one. The second division shows the grand sphere divided into two halves, each with a compressed sphere and a center point. The continuum divides itself continually into halves, with center points and radii paths that are all interconnected. Each division is an octave, a group of resonant speeds. The first division shows the points and the sphere to be equal and opposite in direction and in force. The idea of equal and opposite can be conveyed by this symbol.
They're talking
Every
about this
subsequent
symbol.
division will be equal and opposite. Each half is joined together with a fulcrum of power.
So they were talking about this symbol here, which exactly matching the symbol of Bashar, or almost is matching the equal and opposite energies. And this is image from the book. You can see the first division of contraction and expansion. The second division, we have one pair of a space-time field corpuscles. But each pair, you can see that there is a center point in the middle. And there is a third division and fourth division and so on and so forth. This continue. But what's the most important thing for us to know is that although they are equal in strength and opposite in direction, when these divisions begin, something called predominance occur. They have predominance. Now the first pair that is created, one of the halves it will be space field predominant and the other half will be time field predominant. All corpuscles, they are arranged in the alternating predominant, like a checkerboard in the fields. So this is very important because it will help us to see how the energy actually cascade from one corpuscle to the other. It's not even moving, it's just cascading, it's activating or exciting the adjacent corpuscles, and this is how it moves. But this... Yes, you have question or... No, okay, so I will continue. So we say that one of this pair of these hemispheres, in a sense, it will be space field predominant, or will have tendency to expand, and the other one will have tendency to contract. And this reminds us of the electric field, because in the positive charge we have a divergence here, we have an expansion, and the negative charge we have a contraction. When we have positive and negative, they attract each other, they can stay together, they can, they attract each other and they can join together. And this is also reminding of the Vasica Pisces, the first division in the sacred geometry, when we have two circles sharing the same radius in this way. So this is very important. So we can relate here the space field to expansion or to the positive charge of our electric field. Okay. So in Hinduism, I would like to continue here with, in the Hinduism, they have they express the circumpunct or the first division like the cosmic egg, and you can see here that they are showing sky on the top and the earth on the bottom, with a point of potential or the sun, something that radiates in the center. Sky usually it have less density and it represent the space field. Every time you have a space field or space field predominant substance, you will see that it will have more buoyancy, it will be lightweight, it will be hot, it will be high speed, and so on. So sky is representing the and earth, it's representing the time field, or high density, high pressure inside, cold temperature, so this idea of the cosmic egg represent simultaneously the first division and the second division as well. And you can see that also in nature, our cells when they divide, there is a process called mitosis, which they divide very similarly. This is the first cell, and divided in 2 and 4 and so on and so forth. So now it's very important to say here that even though this corpuscular field, it has the tendency to be spherical, most of the time in nature we will find it in a very different shapes. It can be any shape. They can be, most of the time it's a cubic shape, like a cube, or like parallelepiped shape, okay, because there is a huge internal pressure or external pressure, and those spherical corpuscles, they are compressed in such a way that they take different shapes, okay. So we're talking here spherical shape, but we are maybe talking about different conditions, like in open space where the space and fields are in balance. They can be spherical in nature, those corpuscles, but when we have higher density and higher pressures, they will be pressed together and they will take shape of a cube or parallelepiped as well, and many other shape as well. There is no limit of what shape they can take. Now in ancient Egypt, you can see on the left the symbol of the circumpunct. It's represented with the sun or with the god Ra. You can see this is the spatial sphere here, where my mouse is, the potential point, and the radial paths are like the rays of the sun, and here also as well. This is depiction from our ancestors. They knew, they expressed this knowledge in many different ways. And I would like to share a little bit more about those radii, what is very important, very, very common for them, what we know about them. Those radii, they come in pairs by definition, which means that if you have from the left one radii, you will have also from the right in the opposing direction. And when they do that, they will create something called plane. Plane is defined by 3 points. One is at the center when both radii meet, and the other 2 points, one is on the left when the radii intersect the spatial sphere, and the other one is on the right when the other radii intersect the spatial sphere. So these 3 points together, it will define a plane. Okay, this is very important. It can be in the equatorial plane, it can be in many different directions. Okay, so they do not curve, those radii, they do not curve unless the center spins with a different speed than the circumference. In our planet, our core, it's higher density, and actually its speed, the speed of our core, it's higher than the circumference, and those radii, they will be in the curved way, similar to this image that you can see. So the energy is traveling in or out from the center using this radii. If the signal is entering inside, it will exit from the other side. It will excite the corpuscle will expand, and when the signal exits, the corpuscle will contract. And this expansion and this contraction will actually excite the adjacent corpuscle, the next corpuscle. It will do the same, and in this way, how the energy will propagate with almost no loss. This is how actually they interact between each other. Now, often those radii, they will take different shapes. They can branch like a tree in order to accommodate different circuits, in order to create different patterns for the energy to flow. They are an elastic and contractive force of time field, which means that contractive because they are subject to closure, they go towards the center, and elastic because they can expand depending of how big is this sphere. If the potential is greater in the center, the sphere, it will expand, and also those radii, it will expand as well. The lengths of describe the potential of the center. Again, if you have a bigger radius or bigger diameter, a huge circumference, this will mean that the center point in the middle is huge as well, because they're interconnected. Always when the center point have a lot of potential, it will create bigger sphere. Okay, so two radii located 3 points in the space, creating a plane. This is what we just say in the beginning of this slide. Now, do you have any questions here before we continue? Because we already share a lot of information.
Yeah, Krasimi, please.
Yes.
Can you explain again why the second image, the red image,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
why the radii are curved like this?
Yes, the second image, it's happening when the radii are curved or convoluted. It's because the rate of the spin of the center point is different from the spin of the circumference. Let's say the circumference is making 1 RPM, 1 revolution per minute, but at the center it's making 3 revolutions per minute. It's moving faster. Okay, so the energy, when it's traveling towards the center, it will curve because the center is moving with a different speed. Okay, this is...
Okay, so that is what is happening with the Earth. You said it.
Yes, the Earth core, it's more dense. It's the highest density, and it's generally high with the higher RPM. It's moving with higher speed than the circumference. It's rotating faster, and this is why it create this kind of curved or convoluted spiraling radii. Okay, this is the idea. It's because it's hexagonal, the core crystal. It also creates 6 vortices around, and from each vortex there is a central axis which extend and create a circuit loop, and one of those circuit loops actually create the orbit of our moon. But we're going to talk about this later. I do not want to. Yeah, it's just important that they can be curved. We're going to see later also when they're going to curve, when we're talking about a rotational vortex and irrotational vortex. Okay, one of the rotational vortex will relate to time and the irrotational will relate to space, and you will see that one of them have different speed, the other one have different revolutions. So in alchemy, they're talking about again a circumpunct in a different way. They're mentioning the prima materia. Okay, the alchemist, some people believe that it's scientists who wants to create gold from lead. Maybe this is the case in some point, but alchemy, it's related to transformation, and this is the table of the alchemical symbols. And what you can see here, it's the quaternity, or some people call it the philosopher's stone. And you can see that you have a small circle here and a big circle, expressing the spatial sphere and the point of potential. And you can see that in their table, this circumpunct right here, it's the element of gold. Okay, also it's the element of gold. It is very important. If you make calculation, you will see that if this sphere it's 10 meters, let's say, in diameter, this one it will be 0.4 meters in diameter. So this is the ratio. There is the same symbol in the book called Kabbalion. It's anonymous author, but it's about Hermetism, Hermetic knowledge, if you are familiar. And the Hermetic knowledge, it's again stating that the existence or everything that is existing, it's a part of one whole idea beyond which there is nothing outside or beyond this. That's why it's hermetic. It's encapsulated within a oneness. Beyond this oneness, there is nothing which can influence this oneness. And the only way things can progress or something can happen is if this oneness divides itself into smaller and smaller pieces. So this philosopher's stone or quaternity, it is also in the book. The symbol, the quaternity in alchemism, it's you can see here that there are 4 elements: water, earth, air, and fire. And 2 of them, water and earth, are time field predominant. They have higher density, and the other 2, air and fire, they are space field predominant elements. And you will see maybe if you have more time, you will see why they are. We can talk about this for hours, but it's just I just want to give you overall understanding about this, because the presentation is huge and maybe we cannot finish it all the slides. But so why the fields are called a space and time? Again, this is different way just to see them. The time field is subject to closure or to convergence. It's contract inward. It's creating centripetal force in a sense. It decelerates with opportunity. It likes to decelerate, prefers to decelerate, prefers lower speeds. It spends time in duration. It doesn't want to move. Okay, it wants to settle. If it's something it's dense, it will be very difficult for you to move. It will stay longer in one place. This is why it's time field. Okay, and it's a bonding force of matter. It's the time field is the bonding force, actually what create things, keep things together. Okay, it's gluing, it's the glue of these corpuscles, the time field. Now you can see that when we have black holes, you will see at the center huge mass. There will be a huge mass because there is a lot of accretion. But when you see an atom, also you will see that the core of the atom or the nucleus, it will be also with protons and neutrons, which will be much denser than the electronic shell. The electrons, it's going to appear around the nucleus here and there in a cloud of probabilities. They call it an electron cloud, and will be very less density. But the nucleus will be very high, much higher density, because of the time field is creating points of accretion within the center, because it has this centripetal force we call closure. Now, from the other side, when we have a space field, you have a subject of expansion of divergence. Okay, you experience more space, therefore less time. You accelerate because you will have less density. When you have less density, you can move faster because there is no resistance for you. Okay, it's making sense. Space field expand, occupying greater volume in space. Again, what we talked in the beginning. And space field can break time field lines, because both fields, they're serving like a barrier from each other. A space field, it can break a time field. This is usually happen, for example, when you have fire. In the fire there is a pressure which ignites the time field radii paths, and each corpuscle excites the next, and the space field actually breaks those radii that connect the particles. And this is something that happens within a fire. For example, when we have the atomic bomb, we have uranium, then we have heavy elements which are packed with time field points of potential around which we have a spatial sphere. And when they break apart very rapidly, this space field is released for a fraction of a second and create huge explosions. And breaking, it can create a lot of damage because it can break substances around. It can break the time field bonds, which we call the radii. Okay, so in alchemy, as you saw earlier in the diagram, we have the quaternity, and we have a fire, we have air, and we have earth. And you can see here that the fire and the air, they're pointing up in one direction, and the earth and the water, they're pointing down in the other direction. Again, showing that they are equal in strength and opposite in direction, because they are equilateral triangles. But again, fire is something that breaks those joints in a sense. Fire is something that can hit. When you hit water with fire, the water molecules will vibrate faster, and it will increase the speed of those molecules. It will increase the kinetic energy, and the water from liquid, it will become a steam. So it will go into another density, and as a steam, the water will occupy greater volume in space. Therefore will be space field predominant substance more than the liquid form. Okay, so you can see fire how can create from water a space field predominant substance. Okay, when you have a cold water, when you cool it, the water will become like ice. It will contract and it will go denser and denser and denser and denser. It will contract, it will have higher density. Okay, and you can see the other also. The earth is very obvious, it's much denser, and the water can bring substances together and form accretions as well, increasing closure. All right, and the air, we don't have a lot to say here about the air, but the air is very light, it's moving upward, and gases are usually space field predominant substances. That's why they fly upward, like a hydrogen, and heavy substances like iron and anything you can imagine is moving downward towards the center of Earth, attracting, moved from these vector lines, which we talk that they go towards the center, bringing time field energy towards the center. So the time field predominant ideas are that high pressure and high density, heavy weight, point of potential, cold temperature, gravity is associated also. And from the other side we have low pressure, low density, breaking time field bonds, buoyancy, spatial sphere, hot temperature. I list more than 30 properties of those predominances, and maybe I can give you later on after the session if you are interested. They can relate to anything you can imagine, can be related to space or time field energies. In the Gnosticism, it's very important that this circumpunct, it's expressed like the monad. They call it a monad. It's the ultimate indivisible source of principle from which everything emanates. It symbolizes the unity, completeness, and the divine essence. They're talking about the first division, the circumpunct. And also in the Gnosticism, they're talking about the Ouroboros, or the snake which bites its own tail. This is depiction from our ancestors. And it's very important because it reveals one of the aspects of the time field radii. They have special abilities, and we will see what they are. Now the Ouroboros, it's a very famous symbol, and it's revealed the ability of time field radii to close on itself, to recognize themselves from very long distance, to recognize their beginning and bite their own tail. In that way, they can create a circuit loops, big or small, doesn't matter, and they can create also what we call in our modern science flux lines, magnetic flux lines. Okay, those flux lines are actually radii which are traveling, exiting from one side of the magnet and entering from the other because they recognize their own tail. This is their special abilities. They can do that when they are moved with different force. You will see later on that the atomic spin, it's oscillating, and it moves those space-time fields which already exist between the crystal lattice of the magnet, and they move them in such a way that the time field vector radii paths will exit always from the north pole of the magnet. They will turn around, they will recognize their tail, and they will enter from the south. And when they are doing this, because space and time field are equal in strength and opposite in direction, the space field, it will move in the opposite direction. But when this happens, when the space field is moving in the opposite direction, it's doing its like a spiraling around those vector lines. And in this moment you will see how exactly this is happening. I create a video 3D representations to see how actually, although it's very easy to imagine, but this is the time field line or radii moving downward and the space field circling around this. We're going to explain in the future videos why this is actually happening. It's very simple. When we're going to talk about the space torus, you will see why this is happening. But right now, it's just enough to know that when the time field are entering the south and exiting from the north, at the same time, the space field is spiraling in the opposite direction around. Okay, So this is very important to know. Any line of the time field flow will have a spiraling S-field sheet, and this also will relate to frequency later on. These spirals, when you see them in the two-dimensional plane, they're going to look like a sine wave. Okay, so they will relate to frequency, depending on how much is the speed of those vector lines, time field. This it will determine the rate of rotation of the space field around, and this it will result in different frequency. Now here what I write is the two fields form a barrier of definition between them. If one field comes forcefully against the other, it will be stopped or diverted, not repelled or annihilated. And this is also very interesting to explain here, is that those fields are serving like a barrier for each other. So imagine that you have a glass of half water and half oil inside. Okay, and this glass, the oil, it will be on top and the water will be on the bottom, because the oil is lighter, it's space field predominant more than the water, and they will separate in two pieces. But if you take the glass and you shake it, you create pressure inside, and you will see that they will become very small bubbles, very small corpuscles of oil and water. They will try to mix, but they couldn't. No matter how much they try, because they have different predominance, they won't be able. Although there will be very, very small corpuscles, because you increase the pressure. And when you leave it for a while, it will start, those small corpuscles will start to join, they will create bigger one, higher octaves, let's say, and they will, at the end, will be separated in two pieces. So it's important to know that space and time, they serve like a barrier. No matter how much you try to mix them, you really cannot. But they always stand side by side. And the attraction, it describes principles within the space and time field where repulsion does not. This is very important also to understand, and it took me 2 years to understand this sentence. And the most easy way to understand it, if you have water with soap, and if you shake it, and if you have a straw and blow it inside, you will create bubbles. Okay, you will create bubbles with different sizes. They will have equal pressure inside, and those bubbles will attract to each other. They will stand together. They will form a foam. Okay, so you will have an attraction between them, but you won't have repulsion. They will stand side by side. You will have an attraction, which is a principle, but they won't repel like magnets. The repelling force of the magnets, we will see later, it will come because we have incompatible spins between those fields. Okay, so it's a different, and this also the idea of a spiral around the time field vectors is that serves like insulation. Because of this spiraling S field in the opposite way, these time field radii paths, they cannot merge. They are defined, they are separated. So when you have a magnetic flux line, each line is defined, it's separated, because have an insulation around, made out of space field lines, spirals moving in the opposite direction. And we have a current moving through the copper, and we have insulation around. Insulation is space field predominant, it's not conductive. Copper it's time field predominant material, which is conduct current. Okay, this is another way to see this idea. Okay, so incompatible spin, you see here that actually here we have a compatible spin. I make a mistake in the slide. So we have a north pole here, time field vectors exiting out. You can see that through the right hand rule, if you point them with your thumb, the direction of the time field is moving clockwise here, and the other magnet is it's a south, so you will have spiraling S field moving in this direction, and both of those magnets will have compatible spin. When they have compatible spin, they will exhibit what we call attraction, because they move with the same spin, and the spin it will be in the same direction, and they will attract each other, and they will create an overtone or a bigger magnetic field with the same axis, but bigger in size, because they are compatible. It will create closure in this way. So when you have incompatible spin, when you have south with south or north with north, these spins will be incompatible. They will move in a different direction and they won't be able to create a closure, and it will have a repelling effect, okay, because it's incompatible, the spin. And this idea we may discuss it a lot later on, because I read this book maybe more than 20 times to understand. I do not expect from the first time everything to be clear, so let me just check the chat very quickly to see. Okay, so some people say that makes sense. Very good. So in the Aztec religions, I want to make it like a story, but also from the other side to be more scientific, but not too much scientific, not too much like a fairy tale, but to merge those two ideas to be more easy for us to understand this knowledge. In the Aztec, we have the Tlaloc, the rain of God. You can see this image here. This is not a corn, it's actually represent the corpuscular nature of these fields, which they use. They have like a remnant memory. Somehow they knew about this knowledge from other sources, some of them from extraterrestrials, but they knew about these ideas. They were familiar. So this god Tlaloc, the rain god, it represents the corpuscular field, which is in alternating predominance. As we already talked in the beginning, although the corpuscular field is designed to be spherical, most of them they're crushed together like bubbles in a basin, and they may take different shapes. Commonly it's the cube and parallelepiped because of the internal and external pressure. And this is a cubic structure when the corpuscles go together, just to illustrate. The other, in a sense, expression is the Quetzalcoatl. This is the wind god, again in the Aztec tradition. And it's a very interesting, because the feathers of this snake like an Ouroboros, like a dragon, the feathers around the head, you can see here, are representing actually the space field, which is moving in the opposite direction. You will see later on when we're talking about the space torus how exactly it's this field activity inside, but the Quetzalcoatl represent also the time field vectors and the space field around. We already say that. Let me just move this. The velocity of the spiral in the conjunction with the potential within the flow of the cosmic circuit will show characteristic of frequency. Again, this spiral, if you see it in the two-dimensional plane, it will look like a sine wave, and it will have different amplitude, depends of how big they are, and it will have different frequency, depends how quickly the time field is moving at the center. Okay, it will have different frequency as well. So we will, as much we advance with this knowledge, we will see how we can relate all different ideas: pressures, potentials, frequencies, mass, temperatures. Everything can be explained with this idea. Now, in the mandala, we have different, in a sense, drawings that they represent, generally speaking, point of origin. For those of you who follow the work of Bashar, he have the holotope experience in similar way, in a similar fashion. Now represent the divine self unity or point of focus for meditation and contemplation. Okay, so when you focus inside the point, you will experience a lot of time and less space and a lot of time. So you will be able to connect to different timelines, in a sense, to in this way. So you can transcend your consciousness in a different way once you focus. In the Indian tradition also, they call it, they use a lot of mandala in that way, in order to transcend consciousness, to shift the consciousness from one state to another. Now, the central point may represent the cosmic center, and the surrounding patterns can depict the order of the structure of the cosmos. The structure of the cosmos, because it's everything made of corpuscular field on those radii paths, it will be different kind of circuits. The structure, Bashar explained that those are the bonds of God, what we call the bonds of God. Now, I would like to share here some images from the book and now talk a little bit more about this. Now, when you have, this is very, very important law to understand here with the black. It's written that a sphere develops at the point of intersection between every point line or surface. In other words, when you have a surface which is intersected with a radii, in the point of intersection you will have a point of potential created. Anytime we have intersection between line or surface, any kind of intersection will create point of potential. Okay, and this point of potential, if there are many lines are crossing there at the same place, it will be bigger point of potential with a huge sphere around. If it's only 2 lines or 3 or less, it will be smaller potential. Okay, but every time when we have intersection, a new point of potential is created, and around which of course you will have a sphere. And what we call the flower of life, it's when we have the first intersection. Over here you can see my mouse, and this point, the same sphere, it will be created with the same radius. Okay, and this sphere, it will intersect the first one here and over here, and this, it will be a new point of potential around which new sphere it will be created, and it will look like this pattern. Okay, this is why the flower of life is created, because of this law. Okay, internal reflection between axials and intersections. You can see here this sphere, it's intersecting here, and then another one will be created here. So this is why the flower of life actually represent this law. Okay, here we have unharmonic division. When there are different pressures, different sizes, the fields can divide also harmonically, but also not harmonically. And mandalas are actually representation, visualization of harmonic division of the corpuscular field, and this is why they are very pleasing for the eyes, because we can see symmetry, we can see harmony, even unconsciously. We can see contraction and expansion at the same time. Okay, when you see the mandala, so they reflect something within ourselves, which is close to who we are as a nature, as they reflect in that sense part of our nature. Now here it's very interesting. In free masonry there are secret societies that they like to use geometry, and the circumpunct is used in many different ways from them, representing the God, the supreme architect of the universe. This is their symbol, and you can see that they're using transporter in order to draw the spherical aspect or the female aspect in the sacred geometry or the space field, and they use also ruler in order to draw the straight lines, the radii pathways, the planes of the corpuscular field. This G between, it's representing geometry, great architect, the universe, grand geometrician, generate principle, guardian of the sanctum sanctorium. This is the holy of holies, representing the sacred center within. Okay, so in this slide I would like to share with you that the corpuscles divide harmonically, and when this is happening, as a radius line intersect the interior surface of tension of the sphere, it creates new center point on the circumference. So this radii, when intersect this surface tension, it will create this point of potential here, and the new sphere will be created. Now when this is happening, this new center spread spread a sphere with the radius equal to the first radius. So we have a basically Vasica Pisces symbol here. Okay, heaven and earth connected. Okay, space field and time field predominant. Now, pay attention that inside we have already 3 points. We have 1 point here of potential, we have 1 point here of potential, and between those 2 points, this is the common chord. This line, this radial path is called a common chord, and it will intersect the radius at that place, creating the third point, which will create a plane. We say that plane is made out of 3 points, 1 in the center and 2 at the circumference, and this it will create a new sphere, small inside. This a new sphere, it's in Egyptian mythology expressed like Oja Eye. Okay, you can see here, this is a depiction of what's happening within these divisions when the division is taking place. Now, so this is the chord from here to here, from top to the bottom, and this is the plane because we have 3 points here. They intersect. In Christianity, you can see that it can represent the cross. Both internal and external pressure can be understood in numerical harmonics. The relationship of the chord yields stability, instability, time cycles, forced augmentation and reduction, and many other. Also, so depending of the configuration of the circuit, these common chords depend what structure or what geometry they will have. We will have different substances with different properties, some of them more stable, hard, others soft, and so on and so forth. These common chords and common planes determine the properties of the matter or the substances or the fields, if you wish, when they're not so dense. Okay, so when the two corpuscles they join together, before we're talking about separation, division, now we're talking about when they join together, this common chord will elongate, or it will grow, it will be higher, and the common plane, it will shrink because they're coming closer and closer together. Okay, and when they join together as one, what it will happen is that the diameter or the circumference, it will be 2 times bigger. They will create new octave, in a sense, new tone, twice in size. And this common chord, it will become it will be transformed in the primary axis, which is primary axis X. In the equatorial plane, we will have a secondary axis Z and Y. This is very important. We have one primary axis, secondary axis Y and Z always when we have a corpuscular field or octave. And again, just to remind you, an octave, it's a group of resonant speeds. A group within the corpuscles resonate, or they have the same speed, or they have the same pressure. When you have the same pressure, you have the same speed too. Okay, so this is a group where the pressures is equalized inside, they are in a harmony, they work together. And this is we call this octave. Now, when we're talking about the axis, it's very important to say that they are integral to opposing fields. In other words, the fields, because they're opposing, one is time field predominant, the other is space field predominant, they find agreement, they find, in a sense, they find consensus in the central axis. Time field energy flows on axis and radii. Time field is flowing through the radii that we talk, but the axes are like highway. It prefers to flow in the central axis. And the devices described from Bashar, all of them have central axis, including the conical space-time antenna that he's talking about. There is a video made in Egypt, the transmission code, something, the name is related to Egypt, when Bashar explained that the cones also have central axis, 2 spikes inside, which are moving almost to the tip of each cone. Okay, which he explained that helps the etheric energy to move. Now, you can see here the galaxies, big celestial clusters or bodies, they also have a central axis. It's not only in the corpuscular field. They're everywhere, they're present. And we need to know for this axis that they develop within the energy sphere regardless of the size, no matter how big or small they are. Axes are not imaginary. We're not talking about imaginary axes, but actually they're present as a highway of energy travel or current. The primary axis X is line defining full diameter to the center point of the sphere. Okay, it's sometimes Bashar call it axis T from time, but in our case from the alchemical manual they call it X. Together the Y and Z axis define equatorial plane of the sphere. This is very important for us because in the equatorial plane a vortex will be formed. Okay, when you have a primary axis around which energy is spiraling, you will have a vortex, and this vortex, you will have different circuit within this vortex. The vortex will communicate from the circumference with the center point through the secondary axis Y and Z and through different planes of radial paths. There is going to be communication. A centripetal force will move inside and so on and so forth. So when we have an octave around the central axis will be a vortex in the equatorial plane, and the Y and Z axis are very important for us to see how we can manage this vortex. Okay, but we're going to talk about this in a different videos. The radii act as a multitude of axes, so they're like an axis, but there are many. There can be infinite number within the corpuscle. Planes are avenue for complex circuitry, so there is no limit what circuitry you can create. At the end of this presentation we will see the circuit that Bashar gave us, and you will be able to understand what it means and why he gave us this circuit. And I have information from Bashar also that this circuit is actually given to them from Sirius. Okay, primary axis X combine within radii from multitude of meridian planes. So the primary axis X, so that we said, it can connect with many different radial paths. So all of those axes and radial paths that we're talking about, they are connected in the center with something we can call a mutual coupling. They are communicating between each other. But we're going to talk again this in the future video when we're talking about the spherical energy gain. We cannot cover everything in the first presentation. So the most important thing here is to know that those axes form regardless of the size, and they're highways of the energy, and they're centering also at a vortex, the primary axis. Now, the other relative symbols which express at the same time the cyclic nature of time, because time can be measured with cycles of duration. It can be cycle of 1 minute or 1 RPM. It can be cycle of 1 year or 1 month or different cycles, but time we can measure with cycles. Now this Enso symbol from Japan, you can see that begins here, rotate and ends here. This is expressing a cycle, but at the same time expressing the spatial sphere. And the yin and yang symbol as well, expressing the cyclic nature of time, but also the spatial sphere of the space field. Now this image is from the book, and I would like to emphasize here, it's very important. They describe the living systems for energy renewal, providing circuitry for signal transmission. Now when we have a spatial sphere, the time field is moving inward, and we say that sometimes if the center is moving faster, those radii, they can be curved, convoluted like a spirals. Okay, and when it moves inside, when it reach the center point, which is dimensionless, it reached the point of change equals 0. It cannot move any further, and in this point of change equals 0, it will be transformed into a space field and begin outward to expand in all directions with wave fronts and spiraling again around these vector lines. And now when it moves and reach the circumference of the spatial sphere, again it will reach another point of change equals 0, and it will be transformed into a time field. Time field, it's traveling from plane to a line to a point. It will rotate around here, will create vortex, and it will find its way back to the center. And this, it will create oscillation. It will create expansion and contraction of those energies. And you can see that also they give the yin and yang symbol here, representing this idea. Okay, and you can see if you divide the cycle like this, you can see the yin and yang symbol. Now, because 0 point of change from field into opposite conditions take place in extreme condition, okay, they are seldom experienced in our daily life. It's very difficult for us to detect those changes. We have no equipment to actually detect those changes. But with our adventure into the world of a cyclotron and space travel, cyclotron, for those of you who don't know, it's a device that is a particle accelerator which uses magnetic field and frequency to accelerate particles into very, very high speeds. So when we start to explore cyclotrons and space travel, high speeds and high potentials, we may notice the 0 point of change in our scientific world. We will see that there is a 0 point of change there. It's dynamic point of change also. Although it's zero, it's something that is dynamic. It's not frozen. At maximum speed, at the boundaries of octave overtones, you may experience point of change where a space field may turn into time field and back again. What has acted like a wave may seems to change again into acting like a particle, and then again like a wave, and etc. In other words, this is in the double slit experiment. Light behave one time like a particle when we observe it, the other time it's behaving like a wave. And this can be explained because the light, like anything else, it can be expressed like a sphere, like a spatial sphere, or like a radial path, straight path, and it can cast a shadow like if it was a particle. This also is explained, the double slit experiment, in the book, I think chapter 11, when they're talking about light. But generally speaking, this is the idea of that light has dual nature. It depends with how you observe it. You will see different aspects of the space and time fields. Now, this it's a sunflower which have Fibonacci spiral pattern inside, and the reason I show it here is because there is a question: what circuit we can build with you that can exhibit those parameters to have the biggest numbers of point of intersections in the circular area or in the equatorial plane. We need to build a circuit with you guys that have a lot of points of intersections. It's important for us because on each point of intersection we're going to have a potential point, and each potential point will be surrounded with a spatial sphere. Okay, so we need them as much as possible of those in our circuit. Okay, at the same time we want this circuit to be symmetric, okay, and harmonically divided, like to have a harmonic division, to be equal from all sides, not to have bigger space here and less here, to be symmetric. Okay, but the third condition that we need to follow is, at the same time, the higher density towards the center and the lower towards the circumference. We want with you guys these points of potential, these crossings, to be more towards the center and less towards the circumference. Why we want this? Because we want to create more potential towards the center and less potential towards the circumference. We want to make potential difference. Why we want to make potential difference? Because current flows from higher potential to lower potential. If we want current to flow, we need potential difference. We want higher potential here and lower potential here in order for the current to flow. So because we want difference in potential, we want towards our center to have more potential points, okay, higher density, higher pressure, and towards the edge to have less of this. Okay, and in nature the sunflower, the job of the sunflower is to create as much possible seeds in the limited area, in the limited space that he has. And to do that, he's using the Fibonacci spirals. Those spirals are convoluted radial paths which expand with a golden proportion of 1.618. Okay, not only that, but they are 21 in one direction and 34 in the other direction. Also, those are Fibonacci spirals. If you divide 34 on 21, you will have the golden ratio 1.618. Okay, so if you change these parameters very little, you will have much less crossings or much less seeds in that area. If you change it just with half of an angle, of very little, if you change these parameters, you will have completely different results. But only Fibonacci spirals with this expansion and with these numbers can give you the maximum crossings of the equatorial plane. Higher density towards the center, lower density towards the circumference, and at the same time everything to be symmetric. Okay, and Bashar gave us this capacitor which have this pattern inside. This is made out of copper wire and crystal ball. We have a central axis X, as you can see, and 4 of those spirals, they are moving inside, representing the secondary axis Y and Z. So everything fit from what Bashar described to what we're talking so far from the book of Alchemical Manual. Everything fit precisely. And something else I would like to add here before we finish this presentation, it is that these 21 spirals and 34 spirals are very important. If you make equal spirals, if you make 34 and 34, it won't be the same, guys, because these spirals will give dynamic to this vortex. Let's say we have higher potential because we have more crossings towards the center, we have a lot of potential inside, and this potential energy wants to move to lower potential, it wants to move to the circumference. And when the spirals are different in numbers, you know that the current is always seeking the path of least resistance. So it will seek to go from the 21 spirals or from the 34 spirals. It will seek most probably to go from the 34 spirals out because it's less resistance there. You have more copper and you have thicker wire, you have less resistance. So it's more easy for the current to flow. Okay, maybe it will pick these 34 spirals to go out because it will be with less resistance comparing to the 21. Because it's seeking the path of least resistance, most probably it will take the 34 spirals to go out, and when it's going out, let me see if you can see here. Let's say it's coming from this inner ring, it's going through these spirals, it's going out, and when it's going out, it will reach the circumference and naturally will bend and it will move inward to converge, to contract through the other set of spirals. Even though they look counter-rotating on the image seen from above, the vortex actually rotates in one direction, and it's creating illusion that they're counter-rotating, because in one case the current comes from the spirals from the outside circumference and is going in, and when it reaches the inner ring, it's expanding from the other set of spirals and it's going out. So it's moving in the same direction, it's rotating. Imagine that this is rotating clockwise, but when it comes from outside, it's taking one set, and it's when it's going out from inside, when it's coming from inside and it's going out, it's taking the other spirals. So when you have this pattern, you will see that the vortex is rotating in the same direction. Okay, so it will take the path of least resistance, will take the 34 spirals because it's more copper, less resistance to go out, and when it's going out, it will rotating, it will accelerate, because Bashar explained that those spirals are in the same time plane, but they cross higher and higher distance, and this in our reality it's translated like acceleration. When you have more space for the same period of time, this is equal acceleration. So when the current or the potential is moving out, it will accelerate, it will gain speed. Something, when it's gaining speed, is gaining also energy, and it will rotate, and this energy has to go back because it's gaining momentum, inertia. It has to go back from the other side of spirals, creating cycles of expansion and contraction, creating motion. And when you have field and you have motion inside, you create force. And basically this is the main idea behind the flash matrix device. Generally speaking, there are also other ideas, but we cannot talk. I already believe that we spent much more time that actually we are exactly 1 hour and 40 minutes, so we are good. We have a lot of time if you like to ask any questions. I remove a lot of slides because it's plenty of information, so if you want to ask any questions, now is the time. If you want me to clarify something, or I can go back into the slides. Let me see the chat here.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you please show one version of those cones of yours?
Yeah, sure. Let me see here. One moment. I'll go to desktop. I have here I think 1 or 2 images. Also about those cones, Bashar explained that you can watch them and you can imagine them three-dimensionally in your mind. If you rotate them, you will also create different connection, and you have increased your ability to tap into different octaves or different density to receive information. This is one image I have here. Okay, this is one image. What would you like to know about these cones? I can answer any question that if I can. There is nothing.
Yeah, I would like a lot to know how do you connect to them psychologically, or you know what I mean. I don't know. How do you stay? How do you connect to them?
How do I connect in a sense how I'm using it with the consciousness to expand my consciousness?
Exactly.
Okay. So to be honest, I'm using those devices which you can see behind me. Those are the Merkabahs, that they're built out of copper because they are smaller in size and they're much more efficient in a sense, as Bashar described. So the idea of those is that one tetrahedron is pointing up, which is representing the earth or our density, our mind, and the other one is pointing down, the higher self, which is the space field, less density. And when they both merge together, we have harmony, we have oneness, we experience who we are in alignment in a sense when we connect with the higher self. So basically what Bashar is talking about, to follow this 3-step formula, it's our ability to connect with the higher self symmetrically, not for the mind to be in front, not for the higher self to be in front, but to be equally valid. Or they explain in the book like the law of equivalency. So I'm using those devices, or even this one on the left, which is smaller, and I meditate with them. When you hold them, actually the idea is that you don't need to take something from those devices. Okay, this is very important for us to understand. You don't need to hold them in order to receive something, but instead you're holding them with your imagination. Sometimes I'm using music. You expand your feelings, you increase your state, you feel great, let's say, by using music to amplify your state of being. And when you hold them, you disperse this field, these feelings, this radiation outward to the vast distance in space, in a great distance in space. It's like amplifying something that you create from within. But when you are doing this, when you're using them like amplifiers to expand something that you already feel, your sphere of influence, your spatial sphere expand, you feel great potential inside, and then more information can come back to you at that moment during the meditation as inspiration or as visuals or like in many different ways, or the information can come next day or in 2-3 days when the timing is perfect. So those devices I prefer to use because they're smaller, and this is how I'm using them. But if you read the book of Alchemical Manual, you will see that this space and time fields, you're able to rotate it with simply the power of your mind, with your imagination. You can rotate those fields and you can expand the spatial sphere around you, and you can use it many different ways. But those are permission slips serving as amplifier in order to increase something that you already have, not to receive something from out, but to create something within and to disperse it. This is how they are used
So I
usually.
read them, and them are used as amplifiers, or resonators, as antennas, or
Yes,
whatever.
because the idea is the much you can send out, as much you can send out, this is how much you can gain back. This is how much you can receive. Okay, so if you use this as a permission slip to send out much more energy of what you feel like a bliss, then much more it will come back to you as well. This is what Bashar explained, like the fourth law of existence, the structure of existence. Anything you send back, you receive it. Anything you send out, you receive it back. This
I
is
was reading that book a while ago, few months
yes,
ago,
yes,
and I was trying to explain myself the difference between time field and space field, and
yes.
I kind of made the connection. What do you think about the first thought you have when you um, take time field as a magnetic field, which is a giver, and the space field as a gravitational field, which is a receiver?
Time field as a magnetic and space field as gravitational. Now, when we're talking about gravitational field, okay, there is a two aspect of gravitational field. One is again contraction or the time field. There are vector lines which are going towards the center of Earth. They swirl around the points of potential which are within the substances, and when they swirl around those points of potential, they draw them with themselves. They have a certain speed and they draw them towards the core of the Earth. This is what creates gravity. Okay, but at the same time, because the space field spirals are moving in the opposite direction, any substance that is space field predominant substance, it will move in the opposite direction. In our Earth, those substances are usually gases like hydrogen and helium and so on and so forth, which have very little density, and they move out. And when you're talking about magnetic and electric field, and there is also this an expression of magnetic field. It creates a circuit loops. You need an inductor to create a magnetic field. Okay, so inductor, it's a spiral. It is like a space field. Inductor, it's a spiral. It's in the form of a space field. But here it's the paradox. Okay, with this spiral, which look like a space field, you can create magnetic field which will support the idea of current. Okay, the inductor, it will support the current. But when you have a capacitor, you have two plates, two conductive plates, but they are straight. They are straight like a vector lines of the time field. Okay, they are straight. But they are straight, but between them you will create pressure. You will create a space field. we will see later on why they will create space field. This is why the capacitors, they will explode when you supply them more voltage than their rating. The capacitor will blow out because a space field is created inside, which actually store the energy as a voltage or as a potential difference within the capacitor. So this is the paradox. The capacitor looks like a straight line. It looks like a time field, but it's storing pressure, it's storing space field inside. And at the same time, the inductors look like a spiral, or it's looking like a space field, but it's supporting the idea of the current. And the current, it's an aspect of the time field. Do I
Yeah.
do you
So
express this correct?
the way or another, space field and time field, and the other way, magnetic and gravitational, which is gravitational for one specific thing, may be magnetic for another specific thing, which may be connected to the first specific thing, and vice versa. The other way, I was trying to understand, when you created those copper things out there, have you used fire?
Fire in what sense? Actual fire, or because
Actual fire as a
no, I didn't yet use. I'm asking you because sometimes the circuits are also called fires in the book. Okay, they call the circuits sometimes fires. Okay, and the flash matrix relates to fire in a sense that the name of flash matrix, this device with spirals, is that create a flash over effect. In other words, it's condensing the energies. Flash over effect is usually when you have a fire. Well, if you are a fireman and if you have a fire somewhere, you need to go very quickly with the car because the fire can glow very, very slowly, but at a certain point, when it reaches a state which is called a flash over, just for 3-4 seconds, it can blow so much that can be unstoppable. This is known as a flash over threshold. Okay, so if the flash matrix device create enough pressure, enough density of very subtle energies, of etheric energies, these energies will create flash over effect and they will be condensed, compressed into electromagnetic energy, which we can extract from the device. So this is the idea, and this is how this device relates to fire, because you mentioned the idea of fire. But I did not use yet fire in my experiments.
Yes, but if you take a look on your screen and you see what I see, on
Yes.
the left shoulder, left arm there is that piece, magnificent piece of work. Yeah, okay.
The pyramid, right?
Not the pyramid, but your left, not mine. Yeah. No, the other one.
This
The
one.
other. No, the other one in your.
This one.
Okay, your right part, not your left part. I don't know how it is switched on Zoom.
This
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Exactly. You can see. I don't know if you noticed when you put fire on copper, you may see some color changes,
Yes.
and these color changes seem to be nanoparticles. So it is absolutely looks like it is nano coating itself. So I
Yes.
guess it seems to me that there are a lot of energies there. So this is why I asked if you used fire, because on those fractals there, I can see a lot of gradients between the normal copper color and the bluish dark. Yeah. Exactly.
I didn't use anything specific. Basically, I coated with acrylic paint, transparent. But maybe before I coated, some of the copper oxidized, and the copper is not tarnishing. You know that it's oxidizing in order to protect itself. But I didn't use anything else. Only the acrylic paint to protect the color to stay.
But if you take a deep look there, you will notice some color changes. So
Yes.
okay, so it darker it is, more nanolayers are there. So there is an energy inside.
Yes,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, energy, it's everywhere. The point is how we can see it, because our eyes, we can see 0.5% only from the visible spectrum. And I'm also learning how to can sense those energies. Recently start to meditate more than usually, and I can tell, for example, yesterday I make meditation in order to receive knowledge about the difference between rotational vortex and irrotational vortex, because they are very important. Okay, if you have time, I can explain some of the aspects of those two vortices, because they are very interesting and they also relate to space and time. We have maybe a few minutes. So the idea of rotational vortex is that all the orbits of the vortex, they can be smaller orbits, bigger orbits, and much bigger orbits, they rotate with the same RPM. They complete one revolution for the same amount of time. Okay, but because you have a bigger orbits and smaller orbits, and when they all complete one revolution for the same amount of time, the bigger orbits will rotate with faster speed to do that, because they have wider circumferences. Okay, so you will have a higher speed on the circumference and lower speed towards the center. This it will create a speed gradient. It will create acceleration towards the outside, more kinetic energy towards the outside because it's higher speed, and more potential energy to the inside because it's lower speed, more pressure, more potential. Okay, but because they complete one revolution for the same amount of time, and revolution, it's a cycle, and with a cycle we measure time, we can say that this vortex relates to time. It's linked with the time. When you have irrotational vortex, then what happens is that all the orbits are rotating with the same speed. In other words, they're traveling the same amount of space, of distance. Okay, and because of that, they're moving with the same speed. The smaller orbits will make much more revolutions per minute or per hour, doesn't matter, and the bigger orbits will make less revolution. Okay, but this kind of vortex, it relates to space because they travel with the same speed. Therefore, they're traveling and they're passing the same amount of distance, and with distance we measure space. So those two vortices are different, and most probably we can use it in a different application. And I'm making yesterday meditation in order to ask my higher self, or Bashar, or anybody who is available, or myself, what's the difference between them when one is appearing in nature and when the other is appearing in nature. Okay, and I receive an answer. At the end of the meditation, I receive an answer, like a visual, like an insight. I receive the answer which satisfied my question. So it's very interesting because two different vortices, one relates to time, the other one relates to space. In order to create more energy, in general speaking, the only primary tool which an alchemist can use, or anybody, it's a vortex. Because of these differences of speed, differences of pressure, differences of potential, the current can flow from the circumference towards the center, or opposite. You can create potential differences. And if you use fractals in order to create much bigger vortex, the fractal can expand endlessly by keeping the same ratio. You can access actually different spheres, different octaves, much bigger than your own, from where the current can flow inwards toward the center, and this is how you compress. That's why in the old times this is another story. I don't want to open it because I want to listen. I want to listen if you have any more questions. I mean, I want to give you the chance. If there is something that you want to explore, if you didn't understand, or maybe to share what is your thoughts about this presentation? Is it making sense to you? Do you link this knowledge with the previous information that you already knew about?
if you are talking to me, yes, I linked some of kind of a lot of information with what I already know, and it's awesome. And I would really like to have this. If you may post it on YouTube or somewhere to find it and see it again, it would be extremely appreciated.
Yes, of course. I'm recording it right now, and I will post it on YouTube on one of my channels, and also the book of Alchemical Manual. You can find it online. It's free. You can buy it from Amazon if you wish. You can find it online free. It's very easy. There are two
Oh, that
parts. There are two parts, and you can see and you can read it. The reason I'm making these videos is because I would like to translate this information in a different way, and also to link with different other sources. As you can see here, not all of this information is inside the book, to relate this knowledge between the Bashar information and other sources, and to make it more accessible, to translate it in layman's term. It's more easy to understand for people, more accessible to not be scientist and use difficult words to explain this idea, to be easy for normal people to understand this kind of knowledge. Okay, let me see. I didn't check the chat. Oh, I need to read the chat. Okay, is anybody have any questions, or I can close this workshop and we can continue another time.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is Juan.
Juan?
Yeah. I want to ask if your space-time antenna actually worked.
Yes. You mean the conical space-time antenna or the big space-time antenna with the Merkaba?
Yeah. Either. Does it generate electricity more?
All right.
More.
Very good question. So the first space-time antenna, which is conical shape, when I make it, I did not have a lot of equipment except one oscilloscope with signal generator built within, and I run the signal from one end of the cones, and I could measure from the other end of the cones 10 times a voltage. But the voltage is not power, okay? Voltage is only amplitude. When the voltage increase, the current can decrease and the power can remain the same. However, I had 10 times the voltage with perfect sine wave in two different frequency. One is 80 kilohertz and the other was 240 kilohertz. The voltage was 10 times. I was supplying 1.2 volts. I was getting 12 volts out. At that point, I did not have a current probe in order to measure the current of this frequency, and I did not know how to measure the current in this high frequency. You cannot measure it with DMM. You need a current probe with bandwidth high enough to measure this. So I didn't have chance to measure the power, okay? And then the cone broke. One friend have an accident, and now I'm trying to fix the cone in order to measure it again, because I have a current probe right now, proper, with 60 megahertz bandwidth. So I would like to fix the cones and make a new measurements and see actually if the power is actually more. But at that point I know that the voltage is more. With the other antenna, with the big space-time antenna with the Merkaba inside, we measure also more voltage at different resonant frequencies, maybe about 3 times more the voltage. But so far I did not measure more power as an output than the input. The power is almost the same, okay? And I do not know what is the reason for that. There can be many kind of reasons. One of them is that we are not complete with this project. We were guided from Bashar with several private sessions with different tolerances and different ideas, But he explained that we have 80% of what needs to be there. There are another 20% components that he will maybe deliver to us in another time, or we may find it ourselves through inspiration or through other sources as well. It depends on what synchronicities will bring. But the project, he say, is not complete. I thought that the project is complete. I was misguided because Bashar explained that right now I need to be careful when I'm making the experiments to use less voltage capacitors because I can be electrocuted. He tell me 3 times to be careful not to be electrocuted, and I was very afraid. So I thought that because there is a danger for me to be electrocuted, most probably the power levels will be much higher and we complete the project. But in the next private session, he says that the project is not complete and we have still work to do. He just observed what we do with this information, how we proceed with this knowledge, and from our steps, it depends what will be the outcome as well. And one of those steps I believe that they observe is if I'm sharing the knowledge with more people, if I am creating groups of other people with a similar interest and creating an overtone of more points of potential, because you and me, we are points of potentials, and when we grow together, when we mix together, when we resonate together, more of us, we can create a bigger octave, higher potential, higher spatial sphere, more information, higher frequency, less density, more information. This is how this knowledge it's supposed to be. And he observed if I'm doing this. And at that moment, the moment I decide to make this is because I feel that this is a part of the equation. It's a component of the devices, how we approach this knowledge. If I'm keeping it alone, because for now 3 years I'm absorbing knowledge like a point of potential, drawing from all sources towards me knowledge, but a potential point without radiation, it's pointless. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense only if this knowledge is radiated back in all directions. Okay, and this is the reason why I begin finally to share this information in that way. Because when the information is going out to many more people, like when the energy is going out and accelerate out, and it reach the limit of its speed, the 0 point of change as we talked earlier, then it comes back with interest. So if you want to have more information for yourself, as Bashar explained, you have to follow the laws of the structure of existence. You need to give out what you want to have for yourself. Otherwise, you cannot have it. If you want more money, you need to invest in something. If you want more information, you need to give the information out. And this is how these things work. So to answer your question shortly, not yet, but if the devices are working, I wouldn't have time to speak in this workshop. I will be very busy to improve them. I will be involved and invested in other ventures right now. And this is why I see it in the positive way, because I have time to share this information and to work with you, to collaborate with you in a different way. So far, every time I'm sharing information with some people, I'm learning something new as well. Even the process of combining this knowledge and organizing this knowledge was very useful, because I have learned a lot of things during that process. But there are 20% more components that needs to be added in order for the antennas to work.
Okay, thank you. Because from your explanation, I see what are the parts that are missing.
Yes.
And that's why it's not wise to just rely on Bashar for everything, because he's not going to do all the work for it.
That's correct.
Yeah,
the knowledge can come in many different forms. Yes.
Our solution is a Tesla coil, but that has a vortex at the center. So if you look at the Tesla coil, it has many more parts than that. So yeah, so you can say that that's a coil. But yeah, so I understand that why your antenna doesn't work, and what are the principles that are missing in your knowledge that is why it's not working. So if you look at Tesla, so he has resonance, he has the concept of resonance frequency, and his
Yes.
Tesla coil has it, but he has no concept of vortices. So that's why the vortex is missing in his Tesla coil.
In a
So
sense,
yeah,
when you
that's
have
it.
a conductor, the conductor is working like a vortex, because the description of vortex is like a loop which is enclosing a field. Okay, when you have field and enclose it with a loop, this creates vortex. So in chapter
Right, but the
5,
vortex that I mentioned is
yes,
a Descartes. So it's Rene Descartes. He has a concept of ethereal vortices. So Isaac Newton does not have this. So he never understood it. He never wrote about it. So if you read Descartes, he has all the vortices. He explains how it works, and that was Tesla. Tesla was missing that. That's why he couldn't get his Tesla coil to work. But if you combine them, then yeah, Tesla coil will be complete, and then you have this wireless transmission that gets energy from space-time.
you
So
mentioned
just
you
combine.
mentioned somebody that explained the vortices, and what was the name?
Yes, Rene Descartes. So
Ah,
he
Rene.
is the physics before Newton. So people denounced him because they couldn't understand how vortices work, but he explained everything already. And that's what we're doing. That's why we have the solution already. But yeah, we're just comparing what other people are doing, and the common mistake that we see is that they don't have the vortices theory correct,
Yeah, the
and that's
vortice
why
is
the
very,
space.
it's very important. We're going to make a separate workshop on this. They have, the vortice has a lot of properties. It can copy the message in a sense and expand it, and there are many different applications of vortices. Can create capacitance because it can separate the fields. It can have many different applications, and it's the most important thing to be understood in order to make these things. I believe that in our case we have the spirals, but there is some components missing in order to make the spirals actually move, in order to make the vortex actually move. Bashar explained that we need to, the potential is there, but we need the spirals, he said that they're in equilibrium, so we need to destabilize this equilibrium in order to siphon the energy out. So there are some things that we can do.
Bashar never mentions how vortices work, so that's why yeah he it's like he's not really talking about it because he knows that's the key, and so he's not really saying it. So we have to discover it by ourselves, and that's why I say that Newton. You mentioned Newtonian physics in the beginning, but for us that's not the solution because that's exactly what destroyed the vortices theory from the start. He replaced it with mass. So we're not about mass, we're about vortices. And it's a new, it's a forgotten concept. Yeah.
Yes. If we need to understand the paradox here, it's that the irony is that if we need to understand these vortices and coils as a technology, we need to understand how to create the inner vortices. This is why the alchemical manual talking about, this is why they call it alchemy, because they not talking about only devices and technology, but they talking like them like an extension, like an expression, like a reflection. But they say that you need to understand how to create your inner vortex, how to expand your inner sphere, how to meditate, how to be present, so the knowledge, you can receive knowledge. So when we start to do this internally, the knowledge, it will come. It will maybe from Bashar, maybe from somebody else, but most probably it will be intrinsically enfolded, as he say. We're going to just know it from inside. It will come from inside because we already, all of us, we know everything. It's a question of frequency, it's a question of resonance. If we can tap in the right frequency in order to remember those things, we don't need to learn something, we just change the frequency in order to remember things. So one of the things that are missing in my devices, that I need to meditate more in order to tap into the domains which the knowledge already exists. So I can complete it with no external help in that way.
Yes. Yeah, so vortices already exist as particle spin. So
Yes.
that's one clue. And we use it in homeopathy and alternative medicine.
Okay.
Because some compounds are different spin, and that's why some compounds work on some people and some don't work because of the spin. So we use vortices in alternative. medicine.
Yes. So last time we speak with Bashar was a few months ago, and I was describing him that this idea of the space torus, how the fields move inside, vortices and circuit loops, and so on and so forth. And at the end, he say, what you just described was the matrix of the electron. And the scientists, they don't know exactly how the electron look like. But the point is that he said that I was describing the matrix of the electron, and he said the electron it's a vortex. It's a vortex.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is what he said.
So
And it,
that's why
yeah.
I think you shouldn't depend too much on Bashar because
Yes.
it's already known
Yes.
by human philosophers. So you just look into what the human philosophers know.
Yes, yes. I do
And,
not
yeah.
do not depend, and also Bashar gave me a sign that I should not rely on him because I start to be dependent
It's like you're
from him.
waiting for him to spoon feed you, and your space
Yes,
antenna
yes.
isn't working because you no. So you just
Exactly.
you're a philosopher you figure it out and just put
Yeah,
it
he
together.
wants us to be self-independent and self-empowered and not depend to any other external sources. This is who is Bashar. Yeah. Do you have, guys, any other questions we can clarify? I really enjoy this topic. I can spend with you a long time. I cannot read a lot of comments here. Need to find out next time to know better how to use Zoom. But I promise I will read all the comments when the session is finished, when the workshop is finished. Try to.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is my pleasure. So I will close the session right now. Thank you a lot for giving me this opportunity to share this information with you. I will do my best next time to make another very exciting workshop. There are many more diagrams ready with you for you, and also a three-dimensional representation of the space torus, how actually the space and move inside. It will be amazing this to see because we can understand very differently what is inertia and what is momentum and what is centrifugal force and stuff like that. But for now I will close the session. I will read all the comments here to see if I missed something, and I will be very happy, guys, to see you next time. Thank you for coming. Peace.